When it comes to the Australian housing market, nothing makes sense.
No sense!
The hallmark of a thriving society is affordable housing, whether it's buying a home or renting, because that provides the security which allows people to pursue the endeavours of their choosing, whether that be to have a family, start a business, or just get out and explore nature. So why on earth would Australian policymakers make decision after decision which has done the complete opposite and destroyed housing affordability? I'm Biko Konstantinos, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Did you hear about the guy who dipped his testicles in glitter? Pretty nuts. And you'd be absolutely nuts if you subscribe to my channel. So don't hit that like button, and especially don't hit subscribe, because you could be my Scooby-Doo and I'll be your Shaggy. And our bond would be out of this world. Yes, I know that didn't make much sense. Just like the bloody housing market. So today, I'm going to be asking a number of questions which absolutely baffle me. And maybe you can help me answer them. Why did Paul Keating get rid of negative gearing, calling it a rort, only to return it back just a few years later? He was right to get rid of it. Negative gearing over property is a giant rort, because buying an existing property as an investment doesn't really help out anyone, so it shouldn't be classed as a business, which means you shouldn't be able to claim negative gearing. All it means when investors buy existing properties is that less people can buy their own property. So Paul Keating knew that it was a rort, yet he re-established this terrible policy because he faced too much pressure from all the vested interests. But my question is, why succumb to the pressure? When you know something's right, stick to your guns. You made a good initial decision, but you didn't give it time to realize the outcome that you were seeking. And that outcome is a housing market with less rorts and a better fair go for everyone, so that some people don't get an unfair advantage over others in the market. Why did John Howard bring in the capital gains tax discount? This policy has been shocking for housing affordability. You see, the capital gains tax discount combined with negative gearing basically screams at you to invest in property. And that's because property became one of the most tax effective investments in Australia. Yes, you can get the same tax concessions investing in the stock market, but you can leverage way more into property. So the establishment of the capital gains tax discount really cemented Australia's obsession with property investment. But the worst thing is that when this became clear and rampant speculation had entered housing, no one thought to reform the capital gains tax discount, even though it meant an investor who sells an investment property for massive capital gains pays a lower percentage tax rate on those gains compared to the tax paid by a wage earner. How about that to get your blood boiling? Why did the RBA cut interest rates so recklessly after the global financial crisis? You see, the cash rate in Australia for many years was kept around the average of 5 to 6%, and this meant that mortgages were often around 7 to 8%. So when average interest rates are higher, people tend to be more cautious, as in they don't take out the maximum loan that the bank will lend them. And that's because if interest rates go higher or they lose their job, they'll be in massive trouble. But look at what happened to the cash rate after the GFC. The RBA basically went on a rate cut binge, taking interest rates to an unbelievable 0.75, under 1%, prior to COVID. Now, Australian housing during that period could have easily seen some significant declines, but those ultra low interest rates certainly propped up the market. And that's one thing I don't understand about Australian policy makers. It seems they'll do everything in their power to ensure house prices don't significantly decline. And to me, that creates an unfair advantage to property owners, because the government and RBA basically have housing's back. And that takes an investment that should be high risk and turns it into the closest thing to a sure bet. And that's bloody wrong, my friend. Why did the LNP mount such a huge scare campaign against Labor's policies to remove negative gearing and reduce capital gains tax discount. Bill Shorten took these policies to 2 elections, and they were real housing reform policies. By phasing out negative gearing and only allowing it for new supply of housing, you had 2 policies that would significantly reduce speculation into housing. And that's what we bloody well need, man. Yes, house prices could still go up, but it would have massively reduced that crazy, rampant fear of missing out type rubbish. We don't need that utter crap over housing in Australia, because we need people to have a safe and secure place to live, and we need as many Australians to be able to afford their own home. Speculation belongs to things like the pokies and buying penny stocks, not bloody housing. But the LNP, who deep down would have known this was a good policy, ran a massive scare campaign and got it kiboshed. Let's get past just trying to win an election and set policies for the good of all Australians and future generations. Why, after COVID, did the RBA forecast that there'd be no interest rate rises until 2024? This has got to be one of the most irresponsible and negligent forecasts I've ever heard. Talk about pouring rocket fuel onto the housing market, and yet they kept making this forecast month over month for over a year. And even when it was clear that house prices were rising manically, they continued this forecast. I mean, we were all witnessing the biggest housing bubble in history, yet the RBA continued to make people believe that interest rates would stay near zero for multiple years. I can't even grasp just how wrong they were, and why were they making forecasts in the first place? Why did the government flood the country with record levels of migration after we just witnessed the most ridiculous housing boom ever? After the RBA realised how wrong they were on inflation, they had to sharply increase interest rates to try and curb demand. Now, after those initial interest rate hikes, Australian house prices actually fell quite sharply. But guess what happened then? Absolute hell for leather Burko immigration levels. It's like someone in power saying, gee, house prices were up 40% and now they're only up 30%. We gotta get them back up pronto. And that's exactly what happened. And at the same time, the extra demand coming in made rental vacancy levels plummet. This was a bonanza for every property owner, because the additional demand was amazing for house prices, and also the additional demand meant landlords could surge up their rents and people were forced to pay them because their only other alternative was to be out on the streets. And I can understand why they wanted to ramp up migration after the COVID saw the borders closed, but I can't understand, as the housing crisis got worse and worse, why they continued pushing the record migration levels and didn't take immediate drastic action to ease the pressure for Australians in the middle of a disaster that was artificially inflated, and they were just caught in the middle of it. And lastly, why are we willing to sacrifice non-homeowners and future generations on the altar of Australia's housing Ponzi? I'm Biko Konstantinos.